You'll get your turn soon enough. But it was an article on quite a serious matter, and it exposed SBS's collaboration with a Turkish community group that I would put to you racially denigrates Armenian Australians. And it was quite an important piece of work, in my opinion. And one of the things it brought to light, and I'm happy for you to dispute this if their rendering of the matter is inaccurate, is that SBS reporters are prevented from referring to the Armenian genocide without some kind of caveat or footnote. Can you just talk us through, it sounds like you're familiar with what I'm bringing to you. Can you just
I am,
talk
Senator.
through
I am.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a couple of things to that. Firstly, the article that was in question was an article written by an Australian-Turkish man about Anzac Day. The article itself was absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong with the article. It was actually a very good article. The problem was that the author of the article was linked to the ATA, the Australian-Turkish Advocacy Alliance, the ATA.
That sounds right, yeah.
And which we didn't realise at the time. As I say, the article itself met all our editorial codes and codes of practice, and we were fine with the article. But the Armenian community did bring to our attention that the author was also somebody who had been advocating for the ATA and defended a particular article that was denigrating Australian Armenians, which I agree and we agreed was inappropriate, and we did pull down that article because of that association. We didn't think that was appropriate. So that's the first thing. The second thing you raised is around the how we in our news and current affairs refer to the Armenian situation.
Just your editorial policy now.
Yeah, so our editorial policy is we use words, let me just get the exact words. Our protocol is to say, when referring to the mass killings of Armenians considered by many to have been genocide, which Turkey denies. This is really important because, firstly, the Australian government doesn't call it a genocide. The United Nations doesn't call it a genocide, but obviously many historians dispute whether it was a genocide or not. So we at SBS do refer to it as the mass killings of Armenians considered by many to be genocide. And I think that way we make sure that our viewers understand that this is a matter of contention that historians world over dispute.
Do they?
And absolutely.
Because, I mean, Iran and Syria deny the Holocaust, but you don't, of the Second World
I
War.
don't think there's a lot of debate on that one.
There is, unfortunately.
Well,
I find it horrific, but there is.
I think
sadly.
you may have just made Mr. Bede's point.
No, I mean, the Nanking massacre is denied by Japan, but we don't call it the so-called Nanking massacre.
Yeah.
And yet we're quite heavily guarded, or SBS appears to be guarded in the way that it refers to the Armenian genocide, which is really upsetting for Armenians.
Sure.
As you can imagine.
I think, you know, as long as the Australian government doesn't call it a genocide, I think it's very difficult for us to do that. We would probably change our protocol if the Australian government had a different perspective on it. And as I say, there is a lot of debate on this one. I appreciate this is a very sensitive issue, and we do try and balance the conflicting community pressures on this. It is a very, very tricky one. I acknowledge that.
Okay. But that editorial response or that editorial policy was not set according to pressure from the ATA-AU?
Oh, no.
Just flat out.
No, we've had that for a long time.
Not the case?
Yeah, we've had that for a long time.
Just finally, and I am not trying to wind you up, Chair,